Sukkah, Dafim Tezayin through Chafez, Daf Tezayin, Mishnah says, Hamashal shel defanas milamala lamata. Person's building a sukkah. Mishnah talks about cases where the walls don't reach all the way down to the floor, or they don't reach all the way to the schach. So the Mishnah says, in Givah min haaretz shloshet tefachim psula, if there's a 3 tefach gap between the floor and where the wall starts, the sukkah is psula. In the other direction, if the walls are going milamata lamala, as long as they reach 10 tefachim, even if the schach is much higher up, there's well more than 3 tefachim up there, it's still kshera. Rabbi Yossi says, "Kashem shel mata l'mala asar tefachim, kach l'mala mata asar tefachim." We paskin, however, that on the bottom the share is 3 tefachim. Once there's a 3 tefach gap between the floor and the walls, that's psula. On the top, the gap can be very large as long as the walls go 10 tefachim. Then even if they don't reach the schach, even if there's a big space between the walls and the schach, that's fine. That's the principle of good asik, that the walls go up. We imagine the walls going up as high as they need to. On the bottom, though, we say that if it's not lavud, if there's 3 tefachim or more, that's called mechitza shegadim bokimbo. We don't say lavud, and we say that the little kids, the little baby goats, can run in and out, and that is a problem. Now, usually we just refer to lavud, 3 tefachim. Here, in this context, the Gemara uses the term mechitza shegadim bokimbo. So there's a debate among the poskim as to whether if you somehow block the gedim. So your main sukkah wall, that's a total of 10 tefachim, but has a 3 tefach gap on the bottom, is too high because there's a 3 tefach gaps. The gedim could theoretically run in and out. Then you put another small wall nearby, close to the first wall, that blocks the gedim from getting in and out. So is that the other wall is not a valid wall because it's not 10 tefachim? Let's say it's only 5 tefachim high, but it blocks the gedim. Is that good enough or not? So there are achronim who are machmer. There are achronim, the Chazon Ish, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. They say that even if you have another wall so the gedim can't really get in and out, even though the Gemara says gedim bokimbo, it's a din. Once there's a 3 tefach gap, that wall is not valid. The second wall is not valid either because it's not 10 tefachim. It's not good unless the 2 walls are within 3 tefachim of each other. Then we look at them as one wall. But if you have a 10 tefach wall with a 3 tefach gap on the bottom, and then 5 tefachim away you have a 9 tefach wall, even though the gedim can't really get in or out, that's still not good because neither wall is kosher. However, there are achronim who seem to say that is kosher. Shulchan Aruch Harav, in the context of Erevin at least, the Shulchan Aruch Harav says that if you have Erevin, is the same problem. If the wall of an Erev starts more than 3 tefachim or more off the ground, gedim bokinbo, not a valid mechitza. Happens sometimes with chain link fences. The animals dig underneath, or the fence gets torn up a little bit, so it's not valid. If you put an obstacle that blocks the gedim, Shulchan Aruch Harav says that's fine, and that might work for sukkah as well. So it's apparently machlokas whether you can solve the problem mechitza shegadim bokimbo by placing an obstacle that would block the B'kiyas Gedim. On Daf Yud Zayin, the Mishnah says, Hirchikes asikuch min advana shloshet tefachim. If the schach is 3 tefachim or more horizontally displaced from the wall, then it is psula. We said vertically it can be the distance can be quite high, but horizontally it has to be within 3 tefachim. Another din, that's a din of love. It has to be to start within 3 tefachim of the wall. Another din, that if you knock out part of the roof and put schach in the hole in the middle of the roof, and you want to use the walls of the house to be the walls of the sukkah, the shear is 4 amas. If there's more than a 4 amma gap between the walls and the schach, it's psula. If it's 4 amas or more, it's psula. Less than 4 amas, it's okay. Why is it okay? So the reason is because we say dof and akuma. Another one of the halachos of Moshe Messinai we've learned about, that we look at the wall as going up vertically and then turning at 90 degrees and continuing through the part we would normally call the roof. So it's a dof and akuma, bent wall that reaches the schach. So within 4 amas, we say that. We look at it as an extension of the wall. More than 4 amas or more, that is psula. That's the halacha of dof and akuma the Mishnah has alongside with the halacha of lavud. Later, the Gemara brings avir posel b'shlosha. If you have a gap in the schach of 3 tefachim or more, you don't say lavud, that's a psul. Schach posel, if instead of a gap of avir you have invalid schach which is not kosher for schach, metal or something, or brick, kabel tuma, doesn't grow from the ground, then the share is 4 tefachim. That's where you don't have dof and akuma. When the schach posel is just in the middle of the sukkah, it's not connected to the wall, the share is 4 tefachim. So avir is 3 tefachim, schach posel, when there's no dof and akuma, is 4 tefachim, and when it's adjacent to a wall, you get up to 4 amas, because then we look at the schach posel as being part of the wall. We don't say dof and akuma when there's a gap in between, an air gap, but when there's a schach posel area next to the wall, then we say dof and akuma. That's how we paskin. We paskin all these halachas in the Shulchan Aruch. However, when we say that the when we say that the schach pasel, the Shulchan Aruch says that schach pasel is posel be'emtza barba tvachim. Schach pasel in the middle of the schach, the share is 4 tvachim. Less than 4 tvachim is kshera. And the Shulchan Aruch says you can sleep under that part. You can eat or sleep under that part. If it's less than 4 tvachim, it's totally okay. According to the Shulchan Aruch, it doesn't pass the sukkah. You can even eat under that, sleep under that part of the sukkah. If it's minatzad, next to the wall, then the share is much larger. Up to 4 amos is fine because we say dofen akuma. The Mishnah Berurah says, even when we say that be'emtza, the psul is 4 tvachim is pasul, because there's no dofen akuma, that's only if it runs all the way across the sukkah. We'll discuss the parameters of that later, the next sukkah, but the 4 tvachim wide, but all the way to the length of the whole sukkah. And the share of 4 tvachim is enough of a share that it's chashuv, and it breaks the sukkah into 2, and each half is pasul, as we'll see later. If it's less than 4 tvachim, it doesn't break the sukkah, and you can even, according to the Shulchan Aruch, sleep underneath the schach pasul. Mishnah Berurah brings that yesh poskim say that less than 4 tvachim, even if it doesn't break the sukkah, you still cannot eat or sleep underneath that part unless it's less than 3 tvachim. Less than 3 tvachim, everyone agrees you can eat and sleep under it. But between 3 and 4, even though it doesn't pass the sukkah, there are Acharonim who say that you can sleep under that or eat under that part. Mishnah Berurah recommends yesh lahachmer lechatchila. Chatchila, you shouldn't eat under schach pasul, even if it's less than 4 tvachim, if it's once it's 3 or more. On Daf Yud Ches, we have a continuation of this sugya. The Gemara says that actually, if you have an air gap, we said the share of an air gap is 3 tvachim. Less than 3 tvachim is fine. With less than 3 tvachim, we say lavud. The 2 halves are connected. So the Gemara says, be'emtza, if the air gap is in the middle of the schach, if the air gap is next to the side of the sukkah, then that's less than 3 tvachim, you say lavud. If the air gap is in the middle of the schach, that's a machlokes. Ravach and Ravina, Chadam or yesh lavud be'emtza, you say lavud even in middle of the schach. Chadam or ain lavud be'emtza, you don't say lavud when there's a gap in the middle of the schach. So that is a machlokes. We paskin that the halacha is that you always say lavud if it's less than 3 tvachim. That less than 3 tvachim is always kshera. This din, though, that once it hits 3 tvachim, once an air gap hits 3 tvachim, or a schach pasul gap hits 4 tvachim, is only, as we said earlier, if it runs across the sukkah from one side to the other, or if it's wide enough to have rosh over rubo. Even if it doesn't run all the way across the sukkah, if it's so wide that a person can fit rosh over rubo, most of his body in his head. However, other than that, it's okay. And the raya is, the Rishonim say, the Rambam brings the Rishonim say, ein sukkah she'ein ba nekavim. Schach is not, unless you use boards, you're not supposed to use boards, but the nature of schach is there's always holes, there's tons of holes. So you can't, if you're going to tell me that, if you're going to say that, that any schach of, if you're going to say that 3 tvachim is a problem, then you're always going to have 3 tefach gaps in the sukkah between pieces of bamboo and so on. So it's only a problem. It's only a problem if it's holach al pnei kol sukkah, if it goes all the way across the sukkah. Furthermore, the Ramah explains this problem that if it is 4 tvachim for schach pasul or 3 tvachim for aver for space, it only passes the sukkah if you imagine that part of the sukkah is erased. It's like it's not here because there's too much schach pasul, too much space. Then we have to look at each half of the sukkah separately. So if the sukkah has 4 walls, for example, each wall is 10 amos long, and there's a schach pasul strip down the middle. Okay, so you break the sukkah into 2. Each one has 3 valid walls. A sukkah with 3 walls is kshera. So each of the 2 sukkahs is fine. The case that's pasul is when you have a sukkah that only has 3 walls to begin with. So you have, let's say, like a U-shaped sukkah with a base and 2 sides, and the schach pasul runs vertically and divides the U into 2 L-shaped pieces, an L and a backwards L. So each of those is only a 2-wall sukkah. That's pasul. But in the same configuration, a U-shaped sukkah, if the schach pasul 4 tvachim or aver of 3 tvachim runs horizontally through, parallel to the base, then the lower half, the inner half, can still be fine as long as the remaining walls before the schach pasul have a minimum share. Then you still have a 3-walled sukkah. The upper half, which only has 2 walls now, that part will be kosher. The post can discuss whether if there's a gap in the middle, but there are still parts on the side where the schach pasul doesn't reach, whether you can be machshir the whole thing by going around on the edges. That's a question in the Achronim. But basically, the basic rule is schach pasul with 4 tvachim or aver with 3 tvachim breaks the sukkah. You can't sleep under that part. Some say you can't sleep under even less than 4 tvachim of schach pasul, but once it hits schach pasul of 4 tvachim and aver of 3 tvachim, that part is as if it's not here at all. That breaks the sukkah into 2 parts on the 2 separate sides, and each part now has to be examined to see if you have enough walls, enough of a sukkah left over with a share, with enough walls to be a sukkah kshera or not. There's a discussion of the Achronim and the Rishonim already. Really, the Gemara just says that tzchach pasel of 4 tfachim and aver of 3 tfachim is psula. And the Rishonim ask that how can you say that Rashi says that this that we say that it's that the aver if it is Tosa says that if it's less than 3 tfachim you can sleep there. Rashi says even if there's no aver less than 3 tfachim you still shouldn't sleep on that part. You shouldn't sleep under a part of 3 tfachim even if it is less than 3 tfachim. The Shulchan Aruch said that the Shulchan Aruch said that if it is less than 3 tfachim, the sukkah is kshera, but ein shenim tachim. I may not have said this clearly before, but the point is that even if it's less than 3 tfachim, you still can't sleep under the aver. So the question is, what does that mean? That's what we said before. Every sukkah has holes in it. You have aver that's less than 3 tfachim, and it's possible. Every sukkah has small spaces of less than 3 tfachim. You have bamboo, you have evergreen, whatever. Unless you have boards, which you're not supposed to have, every sukkah is going to have less than 3 tfachim. If you can't sleep under the part that's less than 3 tfachim, how can you sleep anywhere in the sukkah? So Tosa says less than 3 tfachim, you could sleep there. But we go like Rashi. We go that you can't sleep even if it's less than 3 tfachim, you can't sleep there. So that's why the Shulchan Aruch brought the opinion of some Rishonim that it's only if it's al pnei kula, it's only if it extends all the way from one side of the sukkah, to the other. Other Rishonim say if it's Rosh Overubo, but the Shulchan Aruch says it has to be one end of the sukkah to the other. There is a question, that which we paskin, the Ramah actually brought both of those points. The Ramah actually said that either if it's al pnei kula or if it's k'elarim barosh Overubo, that aver you shouldn't sleep underneath it if it's either one end of the sukkah to the other or less, or if it's Rosh Overubo. So what if it's a very small gap? You have bamboo, sometimes 2 pieces of bamboo, there could be a gap that runs all the way across the whole sukkah. It's very small, it's only an inch or 2 small, it's not Rosh Overubo, but it could be a gap that goes all the way across. The sukkah is not possible because it's not 3 tfachim, but are you allowed to sleep under that area? You have to make sure that there are no cracks in the sukkah that go all the way across. So some Achronim say that that's fine, that since early poskim don't say anything about anything wrong with putting vertical schach parallel to each other, even though there will occasionally be a gap that goes all the way across, it must be that according to everyone there's some minimal gap, that it's not a problem at all if it's just a tiny gap between 2 schachs. But there are others who say, the Chazon Ish and others say, that a person should avoid having any gaps that run all the way across the sukkah. The way you accomplish that is by putting a few pieces perpendicular to the rest of the schach. And some poskim actually recommend that. Some people have this chumrah that if they use bamboo or something that's all parallel and slats, the things that go all the way all parallel to each other, and there could be gaps that go all the way across, you put at least a couple of pieces perpendicular to make sure there are no gaps, even small ones, that go all the way across the sukkah, to avoid not being able to sleep under those gaps, even though they're less than 3 tfachim. On Daf Yutes, Mishnah talks about machzelas kanu. You have mats of reeds. So it says, a mat ksheros for schach. So it said, the Mishnah says it depends. If it's large and it's for shchiva, it's for sleeping, then it's a keli and it's for kapel tumah. Things that are kapel tumah are not valid for schach. And you can't use it for schach, but if it's made for schach, then it's not a keli, it's not makabel tumah, it is ksher for schach. Rabbi Eliezer says it doesn't matter if it's large or small, it depends what you made it for. The Gemara says that everyone really agrees to the basic principles. Everyone agrees it depends whether it's a keli and makabel tumah or not. So the Gedola, everyone agrees that stamel l'sikuch, everyone agrees that a large mat, by default, we assume it was made for schach. That the machlokas is ketana, a small mat. If it's a small mat, so the Tanakama says we assume it's made for shchiva, and the Tanakama says we assume it's made for shchiva. Shulchan Aruch we paskin that if it's ketana, that's how we paskin. If it's ketana, we assume it's made for shchiva, it's mikabel tumah, and you can't use it for schach, but unless you know it was made for schach. But gedola, we say stam, it was made for sikuch, unless you know it was made for shchiva. How do you know? It's the minhag, or if you made it for shchiva, or if it's the minhag, even if you didn't explicitly make it for shchiva, then Basically, it all depends on what it was made for. In some cases, if there was no explicit kavana, we follow the minhag. Mishnah Berurah adds that even if the minhag of the heir is to make it for shchiva, if the minhag is to make it for shchiva, even if you made it not like that, you still shouldn't use it because people don't realize, people don't know. I'll call upon him. The basic halacha is clear from the Gemara, from the Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah. It depends what the mats were made for, whether they're made for shchiva, for sleeping, in which case they're kalim, they're mekabel tuma, and they're psulas, and they're possible for schach, or whether they're made for sikuch, in which case they're not kalim, they're not mekabel tuma, and the sukkah is valid. Today, mats are quite popular to be used for schach. It's probably one of the most popular forms of schach. Poskim had a number of issues when they began to produce mats, when they began to use mats for schach in the modern era. Poskim had a number of issues. One issue is, how do you know what they're made for? They're made in the Far East, typically. So the facts are in doubt. Some say in the Far East these mats are commonly used for sleeping. Some say they're not. Poskim, Tachsherim, tried to ensure that the factories in China were told to make them not for sleeping, for schach. Some say they even posted signs. Rabbi Daniel Alevi says that for the OK, so they actually had them post a sign in Chinese in the factory stating explicitly these mats are being made for schach and not for shchiva. Some say that even if they're imported to a country where they're used for schach, but if the country where they're making it is they're typically for shchiva, that would be a problem. So we want to make sure that even they do it explicitly for schach. So that's how you get around the problem of the sugya, by making sure that they're made for schach and not for shchiva in accordance with this Gemara. There are other problems with mats. Poskim talk about the string, the fibers that are used to tie the individual reeds or sticks together. If that string is mekabel tuma, or it's not kosher for schach, for other reasons, that would be a problem of mamid b'davar mekabel tuma, b'davar that's not kosher for schach. We're going to see the halacha of mamid soon, that there is a chumrah not to use things to support the schach, to keep it in place, that wouldn't be valid for schach themselves. So the question is the string kosher for schach? If the string is nylon, it's a synthetic, it doesn't grow from the ground, so it's not valid for schach. So they try to use cotton or hemp string, which does grow from the ground. Even if it grows from the ground, some say that string could be mekabel tuma. Other poskim are more lenient because they say that it's only mekabel tuma midrabanan. Since mamid is only a chumrah to begin with midrabanan, some say that if the mamid is mekabel tuma only midrabanan, it's not a problem. Some say yishim machmer anyway. So the string is a question of what kind of string they use. It's one of the things that Sherim take into account. What string do they use to hold the pieces of the schach together? One of them says, Rabbi Levi says, that the way they tested to see whether they're using cotton string or synthetic, they burn it. If it's synthetic, it melts and drips. If it's cotton, it burns and has a pungent odor. So they test to see what the string is actually used, what the string is actually made out of. The other question about how do you know what they're making it for shchiva or for schach, one of the solutions they say is that they had them construct them in such a way with every foot or so a thicker, rougher piece that juts out to make it really not suitable for shchiva, not suitable for sleeping, so then we can be sure that they made them for schach. Another concern they have with mats is that if the little pieces are tied together and they're tied firmly and rigidly into one solid board-like thing, maybe that becomes like a neser that's 4 tefachim wide. We already have the rule that we don't use boards for schach. So they say that as long as they're not really rigid into one solid piece, even if they're more or less into a more or less solid square shape, if it's not rigid into one board, you don't have that problem as well. And indeed, many people do use the schach mats for their sukkah. Daf next parak hayashin tachas amita. If someone sleeps under a bed inside a sukkah, lo yatzi yedei chavaso. Rabbi Yehuda says you are yotze. No, g'neinu shayinu yishenim tachas amita b'fnei azkenim. But we paskin that tzarich leishiv b'avera sukkah. The sif is introduced by the fact you have to sleep in the avera of the sukkah and not in the avera of something else, not in the space of something else. Therefore, if you sleep under a bed, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, if it's gavoa yud tfachim, once the bed reaches a share of 10 tfachim, then you're not yotze. So the Rishonim give different reasons for this psul, and there's a question in the Achronim whether the reasons they give are daraisa reasons or drabanan. Some say it's like sukkah taxa sukkah, like a double-decker sukkah, which is in daraisa they want to say. Others say it's you're not sitting in the sukkah, it's b'tzeil ohel. Some say it's only a din drabanan. It's a shayla in the Rishonim and Achronim whether this din is a Achronim debate what some of the Rishonim mean, whether it's Pri Megadim wants to learn, even according to those who compare it to Sukkah Taxa Sukkah, it's only drabanan. So either way, it's a question in the Rishonim and Achronim whether this psul is deraisa or drabanan. The nafkamina would be the Kaf HaChaim says, given that it's machlokus whether yotzim or deraisa or not, Let's say a person has no choice. It's either sleeping under this bed or sleeping nowhere, so going into the house. So the only option he has is to sleep under the bed. So if you're not Yotzi Midaraisa, there's no point. Might as well just go inside. But if you say that you are Yotzi Midaraisa, it's just a question that Midrabanan you're not Yotzi. If that's your only choice, then it's better to sleep there under this bed and not to sleep, not to go inside your house. Maybe the nafkamina would be if it rains. If it rains and you can sleep under the table, it's still dry enough there. The table that's 10 tefachim would be the same thing, I guess. So maybe that would be a nafkamina, whether it's there's any mylan sleeping under a bed or under a table if it's raining. And the only other alternative is to go inside. On Daf Chaf Aleph, the Mishnah says if you're somech sukaso b'kari amita. So there's a bed, there are bedposts, and he puts the schach on top of the bedposts. So the Tanakama says kshera. Rabbi Yehuda says if it's being supported by the bedpost, then it is and by the bed and not independently, then it's psula. What's the psula according to Rabbi Yehuda? The Gemara brings two reasons. One of them says Rabbi Yehuda l'shitase. We had him earlier. It says you need diras kva, and this is not kva. If it's supported by the bedpost, it's not kva because the bed is movable and this is supported by the bed. The other interpretation of Yehuda Shita is that you're being mamid the schach b'davar makabel tuma. The bed is a keli, the bed is makabel tuma, the bedposts are makabel tuma. So if the schach is being supported by the bed, you're supporting the schach b'davar makabel tuma. This is the famous chumrah of mamid. How do we paskin? So the Shulchan Aruch paskins basically that it is fine. There are complications, whether it's 10 tvachim above the bed or not, or above the floor, above the bed. But in principle, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, putting aside those complications, that a sukkah is kshera even though it's being supported by the bedpost. Shulchan Aruch is not paskening like this time of Mamid. He's not worried. He's certainly not paskening you need to have kva. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins that it is fine. And even though it's Mishabur explains, even though you're Mamid b'davar makabel tuma, the Shulchan Aruch paskins without any dissenting view that the sukkah is kshera. Mishnah Berurah says l'chatchila you should be machmer because many poskim are machmer. And the Achronim explained, Shartin and other Achronim explained, there are two issues here in the Rishonim. The first issue is, do we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda or the Chachamim? The second issue is even if we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, who's machmer, Tanakama says kasher, kshera. Even if you paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it's psula, but there are two possible reasons. One reason is kva, and the other reason is maimed. Who said the reason is maimed? Maybe the reason is kva. If the reason is kva, we're certainly not going to go like that. But in any event, our sukkahs which are not kva, our sukkahs which are we paskin certainly that a sukkah doesn't have to be kva. So the only way to be machmer here is if you paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, and you say Rabbi Yehuda is not simply l'shitase, it's because he holds to this new reason of maimed, and the new reason we paskin like him. So the poskim debate this. The poskim debate it. Even though some of those who are machmer say it's only a din drabanan, it's exera that if you're maimed the schach b'davar makabel tuma, you may come to use the davar makabel tuma for schach. But l'maisa, even though the Shulchan Aruch says it's kosher, the Achronim recommend that a person should be machmer, not to be maimed his sukkah b'davar makabel tuma. This is the famous chumrah of maimed, that if you have a metal frame sukkah, like the canvas sukkahs with a metal frame, you shouldn't rest the schach on the metal itself. You should rest the schach on 2x4s. Plastic would be the same thing. Plastic also doesn't grow from the ground, like we had about nylon earlier. So this is the chumrah l'chatchila, not to be maimed b'davar makabel tuma. Same thing applies poskim say to tying down the schach, as we discussed before on the mats. If there are ropes or zip cable ties, things that tie down the schach, if those things are not suitable for schach and the sukkah and the schach needs them, then that's a problem of maimed. Maimed is l'chatchila. We say you shouldn't do it, but the Eved poskim say you can use such a sukkah. Even l'chatchila, we mentioned there are those who say that if the schach puzzle in question is only puzzle midrabanan, then some say that's okay. So that's why some say the strings and stuff, even if the makabel tuma midrabanan, you can use them. Furthermore, the post can point out the only time something is a maimed is if without that the sukkah would collapse immediately or with a ruach mitzuya in the normal course of affairs. If a slight wind would blow off the schach and you tie it down, that's maimed. But if it's only a very unusual wind, the ruach she'ena mitzuya that would tie it down, then you don't have to worry because the sukkah is kosher as long as it's stable ruach mitzuya. You're worried about a ruach she'ena mitzuya, so you tie it down with davar she'ena makabel tuma. That's not called a maimed because in the normal circumstance of ruach mitzuya, the schach would be stable, so that's fine. Daf Chaf Beis, the Gemara brings a brisa. Hamuva kamin bayis. The schach is so thick, it's thick like a house, even though the stars are not visible. Kshera, and that's l'kuli alma. But if ein koch lechama nerim mitocha, if even the koch lechama are not visible, beishamai postel and beisil machshir. In that case, it's machlokes beishamai beisilel. Beishamai says postel and beisilel says machshir. Now, you might think it doesn't matter what koch vechama are. We pass in Basil Machshirin, we pass like Basil, of course, so everything's kosher. So this whole thing is moot. But the truth is, the Achronim bring, the Rosh, the Rambam bring from the Yerushalmi, that even Basil only says kosher b'diavad, Machshirin. But l'chatchila, you do have to have the stars visible. L'chatchila, the stars should be visible in the Sukkah. So now the question is, which stars? At least koch vechama. What are koch vechama? Rashi says stars of the sun. What does that mean? Rashi says it means the rays of the sun. The sparks, the rays of the sun should be visible in the Sukkah. The Rambam says the schach should be designed in such a way that you can see the large stars, meaning the stars that are visible by day, larger stars, maybe Venus, the large stars should be visible. Small stars maybe won't be visible, at least the large stars that are visible during the day should be visible l'chatchila. Again, it's only l'chatchila, but should be visible through the schach. We paskin in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch brings the language of the Rambam. Ideally, l'chatchila, the schach should be sparse enough that you can see the large stars through the schach. But the avet, even if it's thick, muvakim and bias, we pass like Beis Hillel that it is ksher. The Mishnah Berurah brings, and not only l'chatchila, so certainly l'chatchila, the rays of the sun, we pass in even the stars that are visible during the day. And the Achronim say that l'chatchila, you should even see at night, you should even see the night star should be visible. So that's l'chatchila. He brings from the Maril that you're allowed to use thick schach that you can't see the stars, because even if you can't see them at night, there are some holes, you could see some stars, maybe during the day. But Bikuri Yaakov says that you can make it if you need to, you can make it. Certainly, if you worry about the elements, it's very cold, you want to have thick schach, then you can make it like the Maril, that even if it is very thick, you can always assume that some stars will be visible. You don't have to worry about actually looking there and finding stars. You can just put thick schach on and assume that typically stars will be visible. Pri Megadim also adds that he says that maybe you don't have to see stars everywhere you look in the sukkah. As long as there's one spot in the sukkah where the stars, you can see the stars, then that's going to be good enough for the sukkah to be kosher. We also bring, though, however we discussed earlier, that even though we say this star thing is l'chatchila, there's another din that if the schach is so thick and dense, even the rain can't get in. We said some posts can say only if it's nailed down, or maybe not, but that's a different psil. That's a psil. It's too much like it's kevad. It's too the schach has to be aray. If it's too thick that the rain can't get in at all, that's like schach puzzle. And there the Pri Megadim says that like that it's not enough that in one place the rain can get through. There we say that any place that the rain can't get through is like schach puzzle, and we apply the rule we said earlier that once there's 4 tvachim of schach that's too thick, that rain can't get through, that's like 4 tvachim of schach puzzle, and you have a problem. The Shulchan Aruch said that even if you can't see the stars, it's kshera. Even if you can't see no stars, not big stars, not small stars, it's kshera. That's how we paskin. However, Mishnah Berurah brings the other rule that if it's so thick that the rain can't get in, that even when it's heavy rain, then that's like a bias, and that's puzzle. Mishnah Berurah says Xeris bias. We discussed whether it's a psul deraisa or derabanan. Here he's mashma selling derabanan, but he says that b'diavad, if normally you'd fix it, you take off some schach and make the rain be able to get in. But b'diavad, if you can't do that, he says yesh lismach al machshirin. You can rely on those who say that even really thick schach is still the sukkah is still kshera.